The Comedian. Written by Hugh Jittiot. How are we doing tonight, folks? The comedian asked, looking down into the bar. Sorry I'm late. I was stuck in gridlock and then I got out of Congress. A few of the patrons began to chuckle. The comedian smiled as his opening broke the ice and moved on to his main act. So I got some test results back the other day, and my doctor told me I have a rare disease. When I asked him how rare it was, he told me I would get to pick the name. The laughter was spreading now. Spreading and growing louder. Here's when I know you boys will get a kick out of. A horse walks into a bar, and the bartender asks, "Why the long face?" The horse, having no concept of human language, kicks over a table and shits on the floor. Practically, the whole joint was in an uproar now. The bartenders, the patrons at the bar, the group of bikers playing pool, even the cooks back in the kitchen. The comedian beamed with pride. I got this scientist friend, and the other day he told me 2 protons were having mass. I never knew they were Catholic. Faces were red, tears were streaming down cheeks. A few people had fallen to the floor, laughing and convulsing. 2 cannibals were eating a clown. One looks at the other and says, "Does this taste funny to you?" Glass shattered, beer spilled, and chairs toppled as more and more people fell laughing to the floor. They flailed and spasmed, crawling over each other towards the doors. So, I've got good news and bad news. Bad news is aliens have landed in every major city in the world, and their technology is far greater than ours. The good news is they eat politicians and piss oil. One man had managed to stumble over to the door. He pushed against it, but it wouldn't open no matter how hard he shoved. Chained, shut from the outside. Eventually, he collapsed against the door, still laughing. Did you hear about the guy who put glitter on his balls? Pretty nuts if you ask me. Faces turned blue, eyes were bloodshot. Laughter came in heaving gasps. Well, it's just about time for me to wrap things up, so I'll leave you with one of my favorites for the road. What do you get when you have a politician buried up to his neck in sand? More sand. The bar fell silent. The patrons and employees lay sprawled out on the floor, unmoving. You have been a wonderful audience, folks. Remember to tip your waitress. With that, the comedian walked away from the bar's skylight and climbed the ladder down off the roof, leaving the container of modified nitrous oxide still hooked up to the ventilation system. He walked back to his car with a spring in his step, whistling a merry tune. He really knocked him dead tonight. What Comes Up? Written by Sinks03.
At 7 a.m. on the hour, thousands of people began slowly ascending into the sky. Reports came in from all over the world of people being afflicted by the mysterious phenomenon. The families of the affected attempted to restrain them or find ways to hold them down before they could rise out of their reach. Those affected did not resist what was happening to them. They froze in place, standing straight, looking up towards the sky as they rose up, not even being stopped by roofs. By 8 a.m., the media began reporting on the levitating, referring to those affected by a number of names. Whether they called them floaters, risers, or the ascended, every nation was in agreement. They had no idea what was going on. At 9 a.m., the president came on live TV to address the nation, to try and calm the nation. He assured the people that all of the top scientists were looking into the issue, but couldn't provide any definitive statements. His speech did nothing to quell the people's fears, as people were starting to rise above buildings and over trees. Panic began to set in as people flocked to stores to stock up on supplies. Shelves were emptied, fights broke out, chaos erupted in the streets. Others barricaded themselves in their homes, hiding away, waiting for the worst to happen. As 10 a.m. rolled by, the confusion and fear was still growing by the minute, as the floaters continued to rise with no sign of stopping in sight. Religious leaders preached to their congregations that the end times were coming, but couldn't explain why they and their followers were still left on the earth. All they could think of was to pray for the floaters, and to pray that they would not meet the same fate. The air felt tense at 11 a.m., and it felt as if the whole world had gone silent. The floaters were higher than skyscrapers now, and nobody else had become a floater either. Those left on the ground watched as the floaters turned into unrecognizable specks in the air. The world watched in silence and nervously waited for something to happen. Then, at noon, they began to come down.
We Fell Down a Well, written by Jjustingraham. It was an accident. There was no other way to say it. We lived to hike. So for us, the Cascadias was a biblical country. Ellen was an avid birder. She took pictures of each one she saw and would paint or sketch them afterwards in her studio. But to me, the physical act of hiking was spiritual. A chance to disassociate and focus on a purely physical task with an unbelievably rewarding payoff. Sunsets in those mountains, the way the colors bleed across the horizon, isn't something you can put words to. Normally, we'd camp overnight if we set off late, but we had some friends coming over the next day, so we packed light. By the time we started descending, the sun had sunk and evening was a purple-blue, and the light wasn't great. Normally we walked single file, tied together with a rope, but Ellen had sprained her ankle, so she was right behind me, hands braced on my shoulder. I barely remember how it happened. One second we were walking, the next I felt the earth give away, the rope catch around my hips, and heard Ellen scream. It was pitch black when I woke up. The smell of wet, rot wood and stone was overwhelming. I felt water pooling around my hips. I yelled for Ellen. Nothing. I tried to sit up and almost screamed. I hadn't seen the bone poking out of my leg, but I fucking felt it. I had a waterproof mag light in my pocket and pulled it out. When I turned it on, I saw her. She was dead. She had to be. I barely recognized her. Her skull had collapsed. Her face was barely there anymore. I knew it was her because of the top she wore and the dull gleam of her ring. I screamed and cried and begged for hours. She didn't move. When the sun finally came up, I saw her backpack. It was stuck on a root halfway up the old well wall, swaying slowly. We had to be 20 feet down, and the 2 feet of water was slick with our blood and mud and God knows what else. I couldn't drink it. The protein bars and water we had were in the backpack, along with our phones. The phone started ringing sometime later, jolting me awake. They continued for hours as I screamed for help before my voice caved in. I was dying of sepsis, dehydration, and hunger. I had to survive. I bandaged my leg and reset it. It fucking hurt. I managed to capture rainwater in my jacket that night. The cool of it was godly. But I was hungry. So fucking hungry. My stomach started to eat me. It was agony. I looked at Ellen. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever met. I lived to love her. She was my world. She was all that I had. I couldn't stop crying as I opened my knife How to Summon a Lesser Demon in 36 Steps. Written by Jjustingraham. I had to yell over the screaming.
What are the rules?
I thought you had them.
I told you to grab them before we left.
No, you didn't.
No, I was packing the food and the flashlight and the batteries and the hand sanitizer and the goat's teeth and the salt. Do I have to do everything?
The air crackled and whistled. The baby thawed, falling off the ceiling and hit the floor with a sickening thump, like a ripe melon bouncing off the highway. Its screaming was replaced by a metallic screech, like a garden rake being dragged across concrete. The green eyes rolled back as foam poured from its mouth. Andrew ripped open his backpack and dumped his shit out, pawing at the pile.
I don't fucking have them, dude. What do we do?
I started hyperventilating.
Fuck, shit.
A sweet, rotten smell like decomposition gas filled the room as I tried to remember the steps. Light a fire. Check. Draw a pentagram. Cream chalk is best, but industrial railroad is fine. Check. Place the sacrifice in the fire. Todd's body was starting to smolder. Perfect. Check. Consume the sacrifice's blood. Clothe yourself in the skin of the sacrifice. Check. Something. Cloves? Andrew screamed, startling me.
The salt.
The demon baby's neck dissolved and the head rolled free, snapping at us as it gathered speed towards the door. Shit. The salt. That was actually number one. Andrew yelled.
You forgot the salt.
Fuck you, man. I know you volunteered your brother for sacrifice, but you're really pissing me off.
He sprinted after the head and grabbed it, but the skin peeled off his hands, bubbling and scabbing instantly. Screaming, he collapsed as I grabbed the bag of salt and swung it through the air, salting the threshold. The demon's head rolled to a stop in the salt, hissing. Its mouth fell open in dismay. Placed the garlic cloves in the points of the pentagram. I picked up the bag of cloves and ran to each corner as the air grew thicker and darker, and a mournful groan echoed from the ashes on the floor that used to be Todd. A body. Incense, I think? Fuck it. In a panic, I grabbed the rose water and started dousing everything. A drop hit Todd's corpse, which immediately lit up in a brilliant pink, blue, yellow, and purple fire, accompanied by Hell's brass band. An almighty screech of trumpets and drums and cymbals and horns. All of a sudden there was a loud pop, and I couldn't hear anything, except a terrific ringing. Fuck, did my eardrums just go? Dazed, I spun slowly to see Andrew on the floor, screaming as giggling imps turned him inside out. I was hit by jets of hot, sticky blood. Behind me, the hellmouth yawned wide. An enormous golden chain looped around my neck, crushing my bones as the scalding air peeled my skin. Wendy's. I left the rules at the Wendy's. Thank you for listening. You can probably handle another horror story, right?